Sneaker culture has had its highs and its lows, quite literally. But after years of being at the top, it's time for us to ask, is it finally on its last leg? Is this the death of sneaker culture? What's good, everybody? My name is Karsten Craning. I am back at it again, but I wanted to talk to you guys about sneaker culture and where it is today. Listen, if you're like me, you've probably seen sneaker culture be a huge cultural force, whether it's the hype around Bape sneakers, Balenciaga Arenas, different Yeezys, or even Virgil's Nike 10. At one point or another, we've seen sneakers be one of the most coveted items one can have in their wardrobe. But recently, I think there's been some things changing. I think there's been a cultural vibe shift, if you will, around sneakers. And I think it's safe to say that the sneaker culture that we have known is dying, because there hasn't been a super hyped sneaker in the cultural zeitgeist for quite some time at this point. And with Nike and Adidas stock continually dropping, it feels very much like the sneaker culture that many of us grew up with for the past 30 years might be on the out in a very dramatic way. While we might be seeing this huge vibe shift, I think there might be a new version of sneaker culture rising from the ashes, which is what I want to talk to you about today. But before we go any further, I want to talk to you guys about the sponsor of today's video, POIZON. Click below in the description box to get POIZON's free legit check right now. Sneakerheads can unlock POIZON's free authentication power play. Get 24/7 legit checks without waiting for customer service. POIZON ensures every product is 100% authentic through a rigorous verification process. From the moment it's checked to when it's on your feet, you know it's the real deal. Results come back for legit checks as fast as 3 minutes with 24/7 full-time service. And POIZON supports legit checks for over 300 brands in 11 categories. For example, some of my friends might have thought that one of my shoes might not be legit, so I'm gonna use POIZON to put all doubts to rest. You just tap the free authentication portal, upload 6 critical shots, size tags, midsole stitching, box stamps. Their dream team combines AI scanning with veteran authenticators. Allowed these post-archive faction on Zybot to get verified in 18 minutes. POIZON is so much more than just a reselling platform. It's a community where collectors and fashion lovers can get together to buy, sell, and trade, all with peace of mind. The expert legit checkers on the platform use advanced tools and years of experience to verify every pair of sneakers or designer items is legit. So don't take your chances on fakes. Trust POIZON to keep your collection real. Visit POIZON today to step up your sneaker game. Try out POIZON, where you can verify the authenticity of your sneakers in just a few clicks. Open the link in my bio and get your sneakers checked on POIZON for free. It's limited time only. Go do that now, and thanks again to POIZON for sponsoring this video. Sneaker hype wasn't really a concept for a long time. It's not actually until recently where we see sneakers really being a hyped item. While certain subcultures adopted certain sneakers or shoes as cultural signifiers, for example, punks being latched on to Doc Martens, skaters with Vans, but these items were what we would call cultural signifiers. They were an element of the culture, but the culture didn't revolve around these shoes. That wouldn't start until the 1980s. Specifically 1985 with Nike's debut of the Air Jordan. The Air Jordan was just a completely different sneaker from anything else in its class. It was not only an extremely innovative and effective design for the basketball court, but it also became a cultural icon thanks to Nike's genius sponsorship with Michael Jordan, who of course is one of the greatest basketball players in history. People were obsessed with this shoe, but they only became more obsessed when the NBA decided that they might ban the shoe. Basically, the shoe's colors were against NBA's codes and regulations at the time. Nike went ahead and capitalized on that. All controversy is good controversy, and so they started running campaigns about the shoe being banned. And these ads around the shoe being banned by the NBA created a sense of urgency for consumers and made it feel like the shoe was exclusive because it was getting banned. All these factors, from this faux sense of exclusivity being directly linked to the legendary run of Michael Jordan, and of course its actual innovative design at the time, made the Air Jordan 1 really the first hype shoe. This shoe had people lining up outside their local mall to get. And there was almost sort of a hysteria to get this shoe, which was the first time in history for a shoe. And there was so much hype and interest in Air Jordan that it really created a culture around getting these shoes. It was a process to get them. There was a resale market. There was this idea of exclusivity. And so throughout the 80s, Nike began manufacturing a culture around this Jordan line and the idea of hype. And this is the very beginning of sneaker culture. Which brings us to the 90s. Michael Jordan had become a global sports icon, and the sneakers he put out with Nike by the 90s weren't just shifting the basketball culture, but also lifestyle culture as a whole and hip-hop culture. The hype around these shoes wasn't just for people interested in basketball, but generally people who cared about their style in general. The Jordan became this highly coveted sneaker, and like Jordan, other basketball players and brands tried to go off of this success, with Charles Barkley making his own line, Penn Hardaway, and of course Kobe Bryant. All had their own signature line of sneakers, though never really even getting close to Jordan's success. But with all this influx and interest in sneakers, and particularly basketball sneakers at the time, there kind of became this sneakerhead element to sneaker culture. Individuals who are not only passionate about collecting sneakers, but began collecting them as valuable commodities. So these are not casual enjoyers of something, rather people who see them as a true economic commodity. They would go after limited time releases, collaborations, and because of that, the concept of sneaker drops being a micro-cultural event became a real thing, because these sneakerheads, or people who sought them as an economic commodity, began gathering around these times. And while Nike was certainly the king of this at first, in the 90s, Adidas came really heavy trying to get more market share. Sneaker culture didn't just grow out of sports in this era, but also music and fashion as a whole. Early hip-hop artists like Run DMC, LL Cool J, A Tribe Called Quest were starting to create a link between basketball sneaker hype and also fashion and fashion influenced by hip hop. Most notably, Run DMC really popularized Adidas as a brand during this era, and it really gave Adidas the means to be able to compete with Nike in some sense. While there would be a lot of brands that have had a hype sneaker or a coveted sneaker throughout the years, it's really Nike and Adidas who are the two giants of this game. And they're the ones who have been consistently dropping silhouettes that not only have cutting edge technology, but are also able to consistently manufacture hype around sneaker culture. In the 90s, sneaker culture went from just being around Air Jordan and the hype around what basketball shoes are on the court to being a staple of one's identity and place in society. And that brings us to the 2000s, which is where you see sneaker culture become firmly and heavily entrenched in global fashion and lifestyle industries. Sneaker culture really began to become a greater sense and essential part of streetwear. Two hip-hop artists would really begin pushing the boundaries and the lines that separated high fashion, streetwear, and sneaker culture. Those two artists were Pharrell Williams and Kanye West. These guys were not only amazing musicians, but also amazing tastemakers, popularizing brands like A Bathing Ape, while also simultaneously reinventing a new audience for Louis Vuitton, and then also putting on smaller brands like BBC or Ice Cream. They weren't just popularizing them within their own circle, but because their music and influence becoming so extensive, they were generating hype around these brands in audiences that they had never been generated hype with before. They were able to push this own mix that they created not only to an urban market or a hip-hop market, but to the wider demographic of young youth at the time. The internet was also blossoming and becoming a thing at the time, so that also certainly helped with this success that I'm talking about. And so while Kanye and Pharrell were making hip-hop mainstream, they were also making their own special style mainstream in a sense too, and bringing this new version of sneaker culture to the forefront. However, their taste-making really culminated into a demonstrable economic shift when it came to the brand A Bathing Ape, and particularly a sneaker that A Bathing Ape would release called Bapestas. Now, you have to understand at the time that Bape was a relatively popular brand, but also a relatively new brand, only being founded in 1993. So Bape had a much smaller marketing budget. They were also relatively niche compared to other brands like Nike or Adidas. And they had nowhere near as amount of capital than a brand like Nike or Adidas did in the 2000s. And for creating hype around a sneaker, capital was important at the time. Despite being a relatively small brand in comparison to the sneaker giants of Nike and Adidas, Bape's new shoes, the Bapestas, had a massive amount of sales and hype that rivaled Nike and Adidas in the 2000s. And that was because Kanye West, Pharrell, and all of their friends they put onto the shoes started wearing them. It drove demand through the roof in a way that Nike and Adidas really had to reckon with. Showed them how important this marriage of streetwear culture with hip hop culture and sneaker culture all really was, and how much more intertwined it was than they could have realized at the time. And so it became apparent that these sneaker giants like Nike and Adidas needed to pay more attention to hip hop tastemakers like Kanye and Pharrell. Nike would begin a partnership with Kanye West in a very similar fashion to how they did their collab with Michael Jordan. They would release the Air Yeezy. While the Air Yeezy shoe was immensely popular, Kanye's partnership with Nike would end up crashing and burning very shortly after putting out the shoe, and they would only end up releasing 2 sneakers together. Partnership failed for a variety of reasons. First off, Kanye desired more creative freedom as well as financial royalties. And the second, something we would learn many years later, is that Nike as a company was off-put by Kanye West's erratic personality. And so instead, Kanye would go transition to try to have a partnership with Adidas. Now, Adidas at that time was not doing as hot as Nike. Nike was for sure the dominating force in the sort of world of Nike versus Adidas. It had actually been that way for 20 years. Adidas had always been number 2 when it came to hype, when it came to sales, compared to Nike. But when Kanye was released from his contract with Nike, Adidas came in and swiped him up as soon as possible. And so for their collab, they decided to give Kanye immense creative freedom, which ended up being a good thing in many ways. Kanye would really challenge what sneakers could be, and he made designs that were influenced by futurist architects like Zaha Hadid, as well as just industrial design in general. The designs that Kanye West proposed and put out through Adidas were very, very challenging, but also very, very innovative. And at the time, they used the most innovative of materials. It was hyper contemporary, and at the time, it was also super avant-garde as well. And while the original release of these shoes would be somewhat controversial and have a mixed reaction, they would go on to really be the most successful sneakers of all time. Kanye allowed Adidas and their Yeezy collab become ultra successful. From this era of around 2014, 2015, when the Yeezy shoes began to release, to around 2020, it allowed Adidas for the first time to have a foot over Nike in the sneaker culture wars. Adidas finally was able to overtake Nike. Adidas became the most hyped sneaker in that era. And so it wasn't until Nike would find a Kanye West design alum that they would be able to get some sort of foot in the race here. Virgil Abloh was a visionary designer and had obviously designed the Yeezus cover for Kanye and many other assets for Kanye West before starting Off-White. And so a few years into the dominance of Adidas, Nike sort of finally was able to get its foot in the race with their collab with Virgil Abloh, where they allowed Virgil Abloh to, with his brand Off-White, to have a collaboration where they allowed Virgil to redesign some classic Nike sneakers. Abloh's approach to design is characterized by sort of this deconstruction, and this really struck a chord with the younger generation in a way that Nike had not for a long time. This era is what I would call really the height of the sneaker culture era, because beyond Nike and Adidas really catering to sneaker culture in this really dominant way in which they're uplifting these figures of sneaker culture to some of the highest positions, there was also this huge rise in creating real tangible economic systems around sneaker culture, especially those which catered to the rise of the sneaker resale market. Online platforms like StockX, Stadium Goods, Go all made it easier for sneakerheads or people who are interested in sneaker culture to buy, sell, and trade their limited edition sneakers. And these resale markets would help reinforce the idea that sneakers were not just a functional object, but a valuable asset. This isn't some sort of small convention or subculture, but really this is a broader piece of society that has become infatuated and invested in this idea that sneaker culture or sneakers are actually valuable assets in some way, shape, or form. But it's also creating whole media companies based off of sneaker culture. For example, Hypebeast, Complex, High Snobiety.
loud, ears ringing real loud. In my blunt, blow cloud smoke, feeling. I'm looking for a
When this happened in the 2010s, it made sneaker culture bigger than ever. But a key thing to understand were some of the major players in sneaker culture who really influenced it were very limited. They were really a handful of people. And if you have whole economic systems of an industry based off of a handful of people, this could prove to be a massive risk. Virgil Abloh would pass away in November of 2021 from a rare form of cancer. And this is not only sad because of the accomplished individual that he was and the amazing legacy he left behind. The companies that suffered the most from the loss of Virgil Abloh really was Nike. In fact, Virgil Abloh was their most culturally relevant player probably since Michael Jordan himself. And I think Virgil Abloh's death represented the end of sort of this groundbreaking era for the brand. And I think that's evident in the output that Nike has had, where Nike's subsequent sneaker releases since the death of Virgil Abloh have really never been able to measure up towards their output before. Without Virgil Abloh's innovative touch and hand that played in so closely with sneaker culture, Nike has suffered, and many have accused it of being uninspired, especially in the 2020s. But Abloh's death was only the beginning of the fall for Nike as a brand. Massive concerns about brand dilution. And with Nike flooding the sneaker market with way too many styles and sneakers, the sense of exclusivity and desirability that once defined Nike's appeal begins to fade away. With so much brand dilution, that Nike, for the first time in quite a long time, is really in this stage of uncertainty, because there is a real question of how they will reclaim their cultural relevance. While Nike has faced challenges with the death of Virgil Abloh and massive brand dilution, Adidas has experienced its own brand turmoil following the controversy surrounding Kanye West. Kanye West, since their Adidas collab, has generated billions upon billions of dollars, compounding each year for Adidas. Kanye became a significant source of income in the Adidas product line. This proved fatal once they realized that this whole giant sector of income was tied directly to the public opinion around this one man. After Kanye West had a ton of controversial behavior that led to a massive public fallout, pushed Adidas to sever ties with Kanye. This put Adidas in an extremely tough position because Kanye's Yeezy line accounted for at least 10% of the brand, if not more. Some people have estimated it's around 30%, but the most accurate number that Adidas has given us is 10%, but we're not really sure if they're being completely honest about that market valuation. It has left a massive void in Adidas' product lineup, and they have been struggling to fill this massive gap, whether it's 10% or 30%, nobody's really sure, but it's created a massive difficulty for them in the past few years. And so while both of those fallouts happened in the early 2020s, now in 2025, we're seeing these sneaker giants really beginning to crumble under the pressure. It's been 3 years since Kanye left Adidas, and 4 years since Virgil Abloh's untimely passing. And we've been unable to see these brands really capture youth culture in the way that they had been able to for the past 40 years. The way that these shoes used to be symbols of status, exclusivity, and identity is really beginning to fade away for brands like Nike and Adidas. While in the past couple of years, Adidas has had a collab with Wales Bonner, which could be labeled as a successful collab, it hasn't carried the same way. It's quite clear that both of these brands are really struggling to hold on to the cultural relevance that they had. It makes it feel sort of like sneaker culture is dead, or at least the sneaker culture that we have known for the past 30 years that have been dominated by the massive companies of Nike and Adidas. But that doesn't mean sneaker culture is dead altogether. This might not be dominated by these giants like Nike and Adidas, which is what I think might be happening as we're seeing more smaller and specialized brands taking massive market shares away. As we're seeing with these smaller brands that are taking massive market shares away from Nike and Adidas, sneaker culture is evolving to be more interested by these smaller niche and hyper-specialized brands. A couple examples of these brands include On, Hoka, Salomon. These brands have been able to stay strong in their distinct brand identities. They've focused on innovation, quality, and deeply connecting to the emerging youth and fashion subculture. Something that's really key about brands like On, Hoka, or Salomon is that they don't suffer the brand dilution that Nike and Adidas have by staying true to the core purpose of their product and keeping to the specialized roots of their product. So an example of that is that On and Hoka, first and foremost, are running shoes. They're known to be some of the best running shoes you can buy. They don't make a lot of soccer shoes. They don't make a lot of basketball shoes. They really stay in the running or trail hiking world. They're not trying to do too much. This concept also isn't exclusive to sneakers. It actually started more in the early 2010s with more niche activewear brands that took market share from Nike and Adidas. The best example of this is brands like Gymshark and Lululemon. So unlike Nike or Adidas, a lot of the brands that are dominating sneaker culture right now don't cater to as wide of an audience. Besides not having as diluted of a brand, a lot of these smaller sneaker companies have also just been significantly more effective at tapping into the current trends of youth and fashion culture in a way that resonates a bit more authentically than sort of the oversized marketing campaigns of Nike and Adidas. For example, Salomon has done an amazing job of bridging their performance shoes with high fashion, influential designers or fashion houses. They've collaborated with Boris Bajan-Saberi, Comme des Garçons, Maison Margiela, Sandy Liang. These collaborations that Salomon has been putting on has really elevated the brand's credibility. Similarly, Hoka, which is known for making those really great running shoes, has had insanely popular and hyped collabs with JLAL or Satisfy Running. Same goes for On, who collaborated with Post-Archive Faction, which is actually the shoe I was showing you guys earlier. Their collab with the Korean streetwear high fashion brand has been exorbitantly successful. While it's been getting more and more rare for Nike and Adidas drops to sell out all the time, these collaborations between Salomon, On, or Hoka have been selling out, and the resale prices of a lot of these collabs are through the roof. These brands have gotten a lot better at tapping into the cultural zeitgeist. And while I don't think they're at the point where we're seeing the pinnacle of these brands taking a massive market share away from Nike and Adidas, we're starting to see that happen more and more. Consumers are increasingly looking for something exclusive, and they're favoring brands that are able to offer something unique in both style as well as performance. The brand dilution of the sneaker giant has just begun to wear on sneaker culture. And so a lot of these people who have been in sneaker culture for a long time are more willing to embrace non-traditional players in the market. So what do you guys think? What sneaker brands will continue to shift the sneaker market? Will Nike and Adidas be able to make a comeback after being in the hole for so many years? Let me know in the comments and let me know what you think. But thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Carson Craning, and have a great day.